Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and people of all ages and phases. Welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Peoria. If you are new with us today, we offer you a special welcome and hope you'll find this a good experience and will come back again. This morning will not be a normal service. Those of you sitting in your seats empty-handed while others munch on their chocolates may have figured that out already. I'm left-handed. Today, instead of a sermon, some of our congregants are going to attempt to have a beloved conversation on race in our nation with those of you here today. We are going to share some stories from our pasts and some learnings from our experiences during last year's Beloved Conversations program. We hope to inspire reflection and encourage action. We'll see how it goes.
Good morning. My name is Joyce Rosenberger. Our reading this morning is A Time to Be Silent by David O. Rankin. There must be a time when we cease speaking to be fully present with ourselves. There must be a time when we exclude clamor by listening to nothing whatsoever. There must be a time when we forego our plans as if we had no plans at all. There must be a time when we abandon conceits and tap into deeper wisdom. There must be a time when we stop striving and find the peace within.
Okay, now we will have three people share stories of racisms they have experienced in their lives, stories from past personal experiences and an historical aspect. And I will start. It is the 1950s. Summer brought new visitors to our family grocery store, tavern, and gas station in the middle of farm country in Rickardsville, Iowa. My little brother and I loved the vacationers who stopped at our store as they traveled on Highway 52 north through Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Fishing trips to the lakes, I think. But there were times when my dad would tell me to go lock the bathroom doors. Dad put his gun under the bar on top of the beer cooler. The farmers held onto their beer glasses and sat straight up, silent. My dad pumped gas into their cars as they walked into the store to use the bathroom. They found the door locked. They walked away silently. They knew why. I asked my dad why, and he said, "Never mind." I was very small, but I knew it didn't seem right. I would hide behind the ice cream cooler and watch them. I looked, but they never looked back. I didn't know what it meant to be black, but they did. As a grown-up girl, I remember that time most vividly.
Hi, my name is Steve Fairbanks. I want to share with you a story about white privilege and racial discrimination. I grew up in a predominantly white middle-class suburb on the far south side of Chicago. I graduated from high school in 1971. In the fall of that year, when we were 18 years old, my best friend Pete and I got hired at a book warehouse. The owner and his son were our bosses. The owner's son, Bob, was in his late 20s and a U.S. Marine veteran. Pete and I and other employees were trained to operate forklifts and stack up pallets loaded with books to be shipped to stores. Early on in our employment, Pete and I became friends with two black guys who were brothers. Phil and Berg were their names. They were from Robbins, Illinois, which had the distinction of being the poorest suburb in the state, and just about everyone who lived in Robbins was black. Phil was the older brother. He was about 24 and a U.S. Navy Vietnam veteran. Berg was about 22 and a U.S. Army Vietnam veteran. Pete and I really hit it off with Phil and Berg. They were easygoing, funny guys. We all operated forklifts and did whatever other jobs were assigned to us. We got along so well with Phil and Berg that they invited Pete and I to their home in Robbins. Knowing that two young white guys might be hesitant to go to Robbins, they assured us that being friends of theirs, we would get along fine. We went to their house and drank some beers, and we had a good time. A few months into our job, our boss, Bob, the boss's son, invited Pete and I into his office. We were worried that we were in trouble for something like being late for work or goofing off, which we did sometimes. When we got there, Bob's dad, the big boss, was in the office too. They proceeded to compliment us, saying they thought we were good workers. Bob asked us if we would like a raise in pay. Pete and I quickly nodded our heads and replied, sure, we would like a raise. Bob said, good. Then he paused. He said the offer was conditional. We could not tell Phil and Berg we got a pay raise. After a brief pause to let it soak in, the offer that they gave us and the condition, and feeling kind of on the spot, the bosses were right there in front of us. Pete and I looked at each other, we shrugged, and we told our bosses, we'll not tell Phil and Berg that we're getting raises. Bob and his dad smiled and shook our hands and walked us out of the office. Pete and I walked for a bit. We acknowledged quietly that it was a crappy thing for our bosses to do to Phil and Berg. We got back to work and went on with our lives.
For 40 years of my life, I was fortunate to be intensely involved in the work of Commonplace, a social justice, social service organization in Peoria's South Side. At the time, I thought I was informed about the struggles being faced in our society for equality and justice. However, the words white privilege never crossed my lips. But in recent months, through beloved conversations and readings prompted by Michael and other church members, I've come to ask myself, how could I have not known? How did I miss this knowledge about our country's history? I want to give you one particular example, and I would like to ask you to participate. Anyone here who has ever used the GI Bill, will you please raise your hand? Ooh, a few people. Thank you. For most of my life, I had heard that the post-World War II GI Bill was the best thing since sliced bread. First, it gave returning veterans financial assistance to get or further their college educations, thus increasing their earning power and eventually providing more income tax revenue. In essence, the government was making an investment that was going to get paid back. Second, it provided mortgage assistance to GIs to purchase homes to house their growing families, thus helping to create construction and related jobs, and over time adding to the family's net worth and financial stability. I wasn't aware, were you, that the 1 million returning African American soldiers who fought against fascism, just like the white soldiers, could rarely use their GI Bill benefits because colleges had admission quotas. In the end, just 4% of black GIs were able to use the bill to get a free college education. And the federal government sanctioned the redlining of neighborhoods, which is a designation of a hazardous investment, thus robbing African Americans of using the GI mortgage assistance. Of the $120 billion of new housing investment, less than 2% went to people of color. A bill that could have helped overcome income inequality instead widened the gap. Many years ago, my husband used the GI Bill for his graduate degrees and a housing loan. A boy from the Bedford-Stuyvesant area of Brooklyn became a college chemistry professor. On a recent morning, I sat across from him at breakfast and said, "You know, we are sitting here in this nice house with your retirement income and great health insurance to a large measure because you were able to use the GI Bill. And in our family and in many others, the privilege has been passed on through the generations to the children who were able to get a college education because their family had a decent income. And then they buy houses, and it goes on and multiplies, and the gap widens. The choir is now going to sing what is a historically Black song.
Today's offertory reading is excerpts from Liberation by Bobby Harrow. Liberation is the knowledge that we are not alone. It is mutual support, encouragement, and trust that others will be there if we fall, and that we need to be there for others. Liberation is commitment to the effort of transformation, to the people in our community, to the goal of equity and justice, and to love. Liberation is passion and compassion. It is those strong and motivating feelings that we must live by our hearts as well as our minds. It's about that force that connects us all to one another as living beings, that force that is defined differently by every spiritual belief system, but which binds us by the vision that there can be a better world, and we can help to create it.
During our period of silent meditation this morning, please think back to a time that you can remember when you challenged a racist act or comment or person in any way, big or small. Any action counts. For all of our actions have magic, grace, and power in them. We will now take a moment of silence.
Oh, Linda, you are so articulate. May I touch your hair?
Courtney, I never see you as a black girl. You don't act like a normal black person. Yeah, I know.
Really, there is only one race, the human race.
I am not racist. I don't see color.
Hey, we ordered lunch while you were out, and we just assumed you'd like fried chicken.
Hey, Neil deGrasse Tyson, why do you want to be an astrophysicist? You're so good at sports.
This is an excerpt written by Daryl Wing Sue. What you just heard are racial microaggressions. They are brief and everyday slights, insults, indignities, and denigrating messages sent to people of color by well-intentioned white people who are unaware of the hidden messages being communicated. These messages may be sent verbally, such as you saw, non-verbally, clutching one's purse close to their body when someone of color walks past them, or environmentally, symbols like the Confederate flag or using American Indian mascots. Such communications are usually outside the level of conscious awareness of offenders. Our research and those of many social psychologists suggests that most people harbor unconscious biases and prejudices that leak out in many interpersonal situations and decision points. Getting offenders to realize that they are acting in a biased manner is a monumental task because A, on a conscious level, we see ourselves as fair-minded individuals who would never consciously discriminate. B, we are generally not aware of our biases. And C, our self-image of being a good, moral human being is assailed if we realize and acknowledge that we possess biased thoughts, attributes, and feelings that harm people of color. The denials by offenders are usually not conscious attempts to deceive. They honestly believe they have done no wrong. Microaggressions hold their power because they are invisible, and therefore they don't allow whites to see that their actions and attitudes may be discriminatory. Therein lays the dilemma. The person of color is left to question what actually happened. The result is confusion, anger, and an overall draining of energy. Many racial microaggressions are so subtle that neither target nor offender may entirely understand what is happening. The invisibility of racial microaggressions may be more harmful to people of color than hate crimes or the overt and deliberate acts of white supremacists, such as the Klan and skinheads. Studies support the fact that people of color frequently experience microaggressions, that it is continuing reality in their day-to-day interactions with friends, neighbors, coworkers, teachers, and employers in academic, social, and public settings. They are often made to feel excluded, untrustworthy, second-class citizens, and abnormal. People of color often describe the terrible feeling of being watched suspiciously in stores, that any slip-up they make could negatively impact every person of color, and that they felt pressured to represent the group in positive ways, and that they feel trapped in a stereotype. The burden of constant vigilance drains and saps psychological and spiritual energies of targets and contributes to chronic fatigue and a feeling of racial frustration and anger. It will take much work, self-evaluation, and conversation to become aware of how we as whites and offenders need to work every day on our own unconscious biases and microaggression tendencies.
Beloved Conversations is a curriculum for exploring the role of race and ethnicity as individuals and as a congregation. Race is ingrained in our psyches, in our spirits, and in how we interact with others socially and professionally. A small group format is based on Beloved Conversations and has the feeling of a sort of structured covenant circle, where participants can talk about their experience and work on personal growth and compassion in a safe environment where vulnerability can lead to risk-taking. Centuries-old societal wounds are reckoned with, reconciled, and allowed to begin the healing process through individual growth. Beloved Conversations begins with an opening retreat, followed by 8 weeks of 2-hour sessions with structured exercises guided by 2 facilitators. The teaching materials are based on best practices and are designed to help learners reconcile their experiences with the mores of society at large, which have shaped their individual perspectives. Our congregation has purchased this curriculum, giving us exclusive rights to use the material should we choose to offer it again. Does everyone remember the chalice lighting response of the last 3 weeks? If you do, please repeat after me. We are Universalist Unitarians. We are the church of the open mind. We are the church of the loving heart. We are the church of the helping hands. This is our church. Now, thank you. Now let's break this down and help explain Beloved Conversations even further. Some of the you might remember our 7 principles. The inherent worth and dignity of every person. In Beloved Conversations, we strive to be mindful of our microaggressions, which are unintentionally offensive to people of different races and ethnicities. Second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That pretty much defines Beloved Conversations. Third principle, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregation. In Beloved Conversations, we form a covenant of trust and understanding within our small groups. Fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We are searching for personal growth based on our own experiences and perspectives, as well as those of others in Beloved Conversations. Fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. We are only able to continue with Beloved Conversations if you, the congregation, approves it. Sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. In Beloved Conversations, the ultimate goal is to be more compassionate individuals so that we can better serve the world community. Seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Beloved Conversations is all about respect for others within the society that we are a part of. Next, we are the Church of the Open Mind. That means we are willing to be unprejudiced and tolerant of others. We strive for that in Beloved Conversations. We are the Church of the Loving Heart. To quote the poet Thomas Carlyle, a loving heart is the beginning of all knowledge, and knowledge of ourselves is where we begin in Beloved Conversations. We are the Church of the Helping Hands. In Beloved Conversations, the activity of contributing to the fulfillment of the need for others to be respected is how we begin to help them, and racism needs intentional spaces like we offer to reverse its damaging impact. This is our church. The origin of the world church is called the called out ones. This is our calling. We thank you for listening and thank you for supporting our calling.
Thank you, Brad, for describing so well Beloved Conversations. But I have to confess, when I first heard about it, and my husband Steve, who is one of the co-facilitators, brought it to me, I kind of rolled my eyes. What do you use? We already know this. Why do we need to have more curriculum on it? Why? I just was puzzled by that. But in the spirit of participation and curiosity and spousal collaboration, I participated. And I was not prepared for how Beloved Conversations changed me. What I discovered about myself is that I see anyone who is not white as other. I care about others. I hate injustice. I hate racism. I rail against inequality in the system. I carry signs of protest. I go to a lecture about Black Lives Matter. But I can do all of this from my safe, secure, white world. I come and go from my home at ease. The educational system, banking, healthcare, law enforcement, government, it's all there to bring order to the world for me in a way that it does not for others. I am always safe in the knowledge that personally, I could go about my life observing others, but not being affected. I came to this realization in a single moment after hours of time spent in Beloved Conversations. I was listening to a friend, one of our invited panelists, describe the threats and bullying her granddaughter experienced as a Black child in a predominantly white, rural community here in our area. And she talked about how difficult it was to get the teachers or the administration to take any action. It was horrible. But what struck me to the core is that she didn't describe this with shock or anger. She was calm, matter of fact. She was describing what she, and likely every other member of her family, has already experienced, and probably to a greater degree, and can expect to encounter in their daily lives as people of color. My friend lives in another world from me. I didn't feel what she feels. And I realized I keep people at arm's length based on those differences. She does not feel safe and secure in this world, and that's unacceptable. What do I do to change this? I start by being more intimate in my own world with all people and not keeping people separate or at arm's length because of their color of their skin or because of their differences from me. I took my friend's advice. Really look at people, really see people. Don't look past them. Don't treat them as invisible. I didn't think I was doing that, but maybe I was. Speak up when something is not right. Step out of our safe, secure world. Get uncomfortable. A tiny way that I've taken action is to be more deliberate in my social media and in my time spent socially with my friends. My friend that I mentioned was not a Facebook friend at first. I don't know if any of you have done this, and maybe this is confession time from a former Catholic, but my Facebook didn't reflect the way that I saw myself in the world. So I consciously make sure that my social media, my personal time is spent with people that I genuinely and closely care about and not my safe white world. My social media is more diverse. I more frequently share news about events like NAACP meetings and contribute to GoFundMe campaigns and the Southern Poverty Law Center. This probably has distanced me from some people, but that's a very tiny beginning to the change that we need to make. It's so small, but I see the change in me, and the change in each of us is what Beloved Conversations is all about, and that must happen for all of us before we can make change in the world.
Hi, I'm Diane Brown, and after taking Beloved Conversations and becoming more aware of my own passive-aggressive racism and my unconscious assumptions of white supremacy, it seemed natural for me, and I wanted to start participating more in the community. So one of the first things I did was join the Jessica Thomas campaign for Peoria County Auditor. If elected, she will be the first African American to win a whole county seat. I'm very proud of her. She's a very good candidate. Also, I joined the NAACP, as did others, and at the second meeting, I heard him make a call for people on the education committee that was working to change a school name from Woodrow Wilson to Dr. Claude Sanders, and the first woman who is a doctor and African American in Peoria. And I worked on that committee, went to board meetings and talked to the principal and did other things with Jackie Petty, the chair, and Valerie Timms, who were already working hard on this. I was happy to be their assistant. And I started joining something I knew existed but had never made it to before, which is Monday gatherings at Ward Chapel AME on the south side, and have had the honor to know Sherry Cannon and Lynn Scott Pearson, who was on the county board, who run that. Sherry Cannon, as you may know, has also won a Women Leaders Award, as well as Jehan Gordon Booth, our representative, who, for those who don't know, is also black. Gave awards yesterday for, except I was in Chicago celebrating a birthday, but Doers of Deeds, and Sherry was one of the big winners on that, along with Pam Adams. So I'm just pleased to be part of this. It feels like life is more whole, and I know my life is still about watching my own microaggressions, internal racism, and looking at my ideas of white supremacy and letting those go.
We hope that the stories and the little scenes that we've shared with you this morning have opened up some windows of insight, maybe, and some doors of possibilities. All of us who have grown up in American culture have been exposed to, and in many cases infected by, the underlying assumptions of racism in the culture. When I was a kid, I inherited racist ideas from some of my family members, and I didn't even realize what was going on. It took me a long time to become aware of how that worked and my determination to fight against that. As others have said, much of racism is unconscious. We often do not see what we're even caught up in. And those of us who are caught up in that we need to work on disentangling ourselves so that we can be more conscious, more whole, and more just people. And it isn't that likely to happen just by us thinking about it and thinking, I'm not going to be that way anymore. Because it's more subtle than that, and it's not obvious, and it's something that we need to work at a little bit to become conscious of. This curriculum we got called Beloved Conversations is one way of doing that. It's one of the best I've ever seen. It opens up our minds and our hearts to truths that have affected us all our lives. It gives us hope of a fairer and more loving world for all people. So we wanted, at least today, to share with this whole congregation the experience that we had so that you would know something about what we did together. And we want to promise to you that we will offer it again so that those who didn't have a chance at the first go around to do this, we will offer you that chance again. And we hope that you'll be interested in that. We invite this whole community to join us on the path to the beloved community that is within our reach. I would like to ask all the people who participated in Beloved Conversations to please stand up. There they are.